Gigolo,
Gigolo,
everywhere I go,
Gigolo,
people
Gigolo,
know the power
Gigolo,
of play.
Gigolo, Gigolo, Gigolo,
Paid for every dance,
Gigolo,
selling his romance.
Gigolo,
Oh,
Gigolo,
what
Gigolo,
a sin.
Gigolo, Gigolo, Gigolo.
And there will come a day, and youth will pass away, and what will they say about me? When the end comes, I know they'll suggest the Gigolo like those. And without me, I ain't got nobody. Oh, and there's nobody that cares for me. There's nobody that cares for me. I'm so sad and lonely. Hey, sad and lonely, sad and lonely. Want some sweet mama? Come take a chance with me, 'cause I ain't so bad. And I'll sing her sweet love song. She will only be I ain't got nobody. Oh, and there's nobody that cares for me. There's nobody that cares for me.
If you had to start picking the greatest performers and you were limited to 5, for my money, Louis would be starting off at the top.
What makes him great and continues to make him great is he played for the people.
He was given God-given gift of this personality, this energy.
He could read audiences and he knew what they wanted to hear. And that's the way he called the show.
He was performing for the people's enjoyment. There was nothing better for him than to make people smile and laugh, you know?
He was a genius.
Nobody cares for me. There's nobody that cares for me. I'm so sad and sad and lonely, sad and lonely. Why don't some sweet? Why don't some sweet? Watch your hands. And a single. We love song all of the time. And she will only be baby, 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 baby. Nobody. There ain't a soul. There isn't anyone. There's no one. There can't be one. There shouldn't be one. There mustn't be one. Are you one? He's one. And there's nobody. Nobody cares for me.
Everybody came in and watched him, all the big stars, because he had incredible timing and, of course, funny, and his energy was nonstop, and, you know, he had a great band, and the band was just pumping the whole time, and he was an all-around entertainer, the best.
The audiences, they love Louis. They love Louis. He was a well-loved man. What a performer.
When you think of the Mount Rushmore of Italians, Sinatra, Mario Lanza, Tony Bennett, Caruso, and Louis Prima. And it all kind of forms a really big picture of the Italian experience in America. And Louis Prima was one of the guys that really, really made us proud.
Mamma mia, pensacci tu. Se ti non hai, piscello, e ti va, e ti venne sempre baccalare mano dentro. Se ci picchia fantasia, baccalare mano dentro. Oh, mamma, zumba zumba baccalà. Oh, mamma, zumba zumba baccalà. Oh, mamma, zumba zumba baccalà.
His music is basically the soundtrack to Italian family life. If you think about gatherings of Italian families sitting around the table, you can hear songs like C'è la Luna and Angelina and things like that in the background, and it just wouldn't seem the same without that.
What I liked about Louis Prima was that he really was a real person, that he presented exactly what he was without pretension. He was never really ashamed of who he was.
Well, you know, we used to have a tagline about Louis. This cat's got 9 lives, and I think that Louis did have 9 lives.
Way down yonder in New Orleans, there's a land of dreamy dreams, a garden of Eden, you know what I mean. Creole babies with flashing eyes, softly whispers in tender sighs. Stop, oh, won't you give your lady fair a little smile? Would you like to ring the bell a little while? It may be heaven right here on earth with all those beautiful queens. Way down yonder in good old New Orleans.
Originally, he started out playing, you know, straight jazz, and he was really good at it.
All throughout his career, he's really in tune with what, you know, people want to hear. And even though there are periods once in a while where he sort of stumbles or he sort of looks around for the next thing, he always finds it. He's very much in tune with whatever's going down. I mean, whatever people want to hear, Prima's doing it.
I think his role in the evolution and creation of rock and roll has been vastly underestimated.
And yet at the same time, he's not just following a trend. He's not just jumping on a bandwagon. He's always doing it on you know, the Prima way, and he's always making it sound good.
Wherever he went, he became well, in Vegas, he became an actual paradigm of what a Vegas performance should be.
He knows the value of good popular music. He knows the value of a good song versus a crummy song, and he really has that kind of appreciation, the same way a Frank Sinatra had it or an Artie Shaw had it. I mean, these are all people that have like a larger vision for what pop music meant. But Prima's the only one who takes that and totally turns it on its ear. He's the one who satirizes it. I mean, who's determined, as great as, say, I've Got You Under My Skin is, or that old Black Magic, Prima knows that he can make an audience laugh with it, or make an audience get off on that song more by making fun of it and making fun with it.
Your old Black Magic has me in a spell. Oh, Black Magic that you weave so well. Ties your fingers up and down my spine. Same old witchcraft when your eyes meet mine. Same old tingle that I feel inside. Then that elevator starts to try. Down and down I go. Oh, round and around I go. Like a leaf caught in the tide. I should stay away, but what can I do? I hear your name and I'm aflame. Flame, burning desire. That only your kiss put out the fire. For you're the lover I have waited for. You're the mate that fate had me created for. And every time your lips meet mine, baby, down and down I go, round and round I go. In a spin, loving the spin I'm in, under the old black. Oh, in a spin, loving the spin I'm in, under the old black magic called love. In a spin, loving the spin I'm in, under the old black magic called love. I should stay away, but what can I do? I hear your name and I'm a flame. Flame, oh, in the dark. That only your kiss, son, put out the fire. For you're the blubber I have waited for. You're the waste that fate had me created for. And every time your lips meet mine, baby, down and down I go, round and round I go. In a spin, loving the spin I'm in, under the old light. Oh, in a spin, loving the spin I'm in, under the old black magic called love. In a spin, loving the spin I'm in, under the old black magic called love. Under the old black magic called love.
He can play take a great song and do it completely wonderfully and really make you feel, you know, feel it down to the depth of your soul. But at the same time, he's got to make fun of it. He's got to tear it apart. He's got to pull it limb from limb and make you see how silly it is, you know. And he's got to make himself the silliest person of all.
Some people say, oh, well, that's such low, crude humor. But it was funny. And that's the essence of it. He never stopped having fun, and he made sure that if you were in the audience, you were going to have fun too.
Prima was apparently, you know, according to all sorts of eyewitness testimony, Prima was really, you know, quite a ladies' man for his whole career. You know, he had 5 wives and Lord knows how many affiliations, as it were.
Well, Louis was the kind of guy that could engender a little romance with the ladies. You know, he was a big, good-looking guy. He was a star.
He had that charisma, that little boy thing about him. And I think he could have probably had any woman he ever wanted.
Louis caused a lot of excitement in the audience, and I guess some of that spilled over to their interest after the show.
His philosophy in life was familiarity breeds contempt. He didn't hang out with nobody. He was a loner. That's true. And that was Louis Prima. We played golf together. After we get through playing golf, he'd go his way, I went mine. But don't misunderstand me. Nice man.
He was not a vicious man. He didn't say, hey, that guy, you did that. He wasn't that kind of a guy. He just said, that's not right. You gotta do it this way, this way. He was not vicious. He never said anything bad with anger. I said, tell Louis, maybe once in a while you should get in the car and go and yell or something. You keep it all in here.
He was, you know, always laughing, always had a good time. I very rarely saw him in a bad mood.
He took care of business, took care of himself, loved his children, loved his family, and was really quiet.
The courage that Louis Prima had in allowing himself to make fun from good music came from that sense of being protected by family and friends.
My grandfather and grandmothers, they came over here from Sicily, and they landed in Argentina. So after a few weeks, my grandfather said, this isn't the America we want to be in. So the next port of entry was New Orleans. That's why you got so many Italian Americans in New Orleans.
The French Quarter was more the Italian Quarter in those days, right at the turn of the century, than it was French.
Louis, of course, is growing up in the French Quarter and the Treme.
My mother-in-law was Angelina, and my father-in-law called him Pop. He was big like a Santa Claus, very quiet. Leon took after his daddy, and Louis took after his mother.
Louis was the apple of Mama's eye, but then he would be the apple of anyone's eye.
She did minstrel shows down at St. Mary's Church in the quarter. She sang well. She did a lot of songs and loved doing it.
She was always right there with him.
Sunday in an Italian home, you listen to a lot of opera, a lot of Caruso, Tito Schipa. A great deal of opera on a Sunday goes well with the pasta and the wine.
It was a time for socializing. There were characters in the neighborhood that would always, go around, visit everybody they knew, have one drink, and move on to the next place.
When we were kids, I played the piano, and Louis played the violin, and Sister Mary Ann played the piano.
Bands like the Razzy Dazzy Spasm Band, which was led by Emile Stalebread Lacombe, took homemade instruments and would station themselves on street corners to play for nickels or for dimes. In many cases, they would, in fact, infiltrate Storyville in the district and work for the prostitutes.
We used to listen to the black fellas that would play, the black band that would play on the trucks advertising different dances that they had.
Louis told me that as a child, he also went and stuck his head in on the little black churches, which were very near where he was raised, and stick his head in and see all of that excitement that was part of the worship.
If you look at Canal Street in the midst of a Zulu parade in 1929, what you're going to see is white, black, colored, Latino, in other words, the entire spectrum of ethnicity right there on Canal Street, waiting for King Zulu to come down, waiting for the music of the Eureka Brass Band, or making music for themselves. Because in New Orleans, music is not a luxury, as it is in most American cities. It's a necessity. This is where New Orleans musicians excel. They used to have business cards printed up that said music for all occasions. And frequently this means entertaining on every level. Humor, they're playing for dancers. If you want a concert, if you want to eat, if you want to march out in the streets in the second line, they're going to give you the exact right music for that environment.
Then I switched to the trumpet. And then when I went on the road, I left an old trumpet at home. And I stayed out about a year or so, and then when I came home, Louis was blowing the trumpet, and he was blowing it real good.
One might say that Louis Prima became a professional musician at the point at which he joins the Musicians Union in 1928. What the union in New Orleans was really all about was trying to get good gigs, and this meant primarily playing some of the theaters like the Sanger on Canal Street. The problem is that if you want to play jazz, you might find yourself a little out of place in some of these theater pit orchestras.
I happened to be one of the extra reed men that they wanted in there, and Louis Prima was one of the trumpets who went in. But Chernyavsky never did really like Louis' style of playing. So he gave Louis the regular 2 weeks notice that is required. And this young man was practically in tears. And he said, one of these days, this guy is going to feel sorry. He says, I'm going to make it. He says, he fired me, but he's going to be sorry he fired me, because I'll be bigger than he was.
I first arrived in New Orleans in 1932. I was a saxophonist with the Tom Guerin Band, a San Francisco band. One of the new young people who was making a big impression here locally was, of course, Louis Prima. He was a new kind of entertainer. Lots of energy, and he could turn a word and get a laugh anytime he wanted.
Prima comes to New York in 1934. He had been discovered the previous year by Guy Lombardo, of all people. We don't think of Guy Lombardo as somebody who was out to do a lot for hot jazz, but he just, heard Prima playing in a club in New Orleans, brought him up.
Of course, Mama made him come home from New York at first, but then she agreed when he got home to let him go back to stay and try to make good.
And eventually he comes into the famous door in New York.
And they were an instantaneous smash.
And when Prima plays there on 52nd Street in 34, it starts this big breakthrough, this big kind of avalanche of interest in 52nd Street. And it really establishes that venue as the street of jazz, as it became. And it also established Prima as kind of a trendy in thing at that point. That's Prima's first burst of fame.
Response is, of course, one of the first and most important components of jazz. Call and response is essential to the way New Orleans jazz musicians think. But on a personal relationship, too, you want feedback. You want to be connected to the person you're dealing with. It's warm rather than cold. And Prima was a master of this, of getting a response, of finding a way to get people to react.
Gene Krupa would come in and sit in. All of the famous musicians of the time would come in, and Martha Ray would come and sing for free all the time. She just loved Louis's music. I think she loved Louis, too, and I think there for a while he and she were dating.
Sam Weiss, who owned that club, said that when Prima would sing, "Let's Have a Jubilee," the women would like sigh and swoon, like as if he were saying, "Let's have an orgy."
I've actually seen people, women pass out. Just blow their top in the famous door in New York.
There's a lot of emphasis on the women and their response in the audience at places like the famous door, but the musicians were definitely paying attention too. I think what Louis was bringing was a kind of special verve that he had, not only as an instrumentalist, but as a vocalist particularly. He had his own style.
He had a little club there called the Famous Door that he named after the club in New York.
Sorry, folks, I'm closing up now.
Oh, that's a shame. I could listen to that sort of music all night.
Well, why don't we?
Well, how can we?
Louis Prima's right here in Hollywood, the Famous Door Cafe. I know him personally.
Do you really? Well, let's go.
Taxi.
You've got to be different to create a sensation in Hollywood, but that was to be expected of Louis Prima, top-notch swing trumpeter with a singing style all his own. If you've missed Louis along the entertainment highways, you'd better stop, look, and get an earful.
Chinatown, my Chinatown, where the lights are low. Dreamy, schemy Chinatown, drifting soft and low. How I love my Chinatown. Oh, Chinatown, down, 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 la, la, la. I'm in love with you. Oh,
That club was filled every night with the biggest stars of the industry at that time. They all became his very dear friends, played polo with Spencer Tracy and Walt Disney and all those guys, and certainly he was excited to be out there.
The last person that Jean Harlow loved was Louis.
I think he was very serious about Jean Harlow and she about him.
Her chauffeur would bring her to the Famous Door, and she'd sit back in a smoky corner and watch Louis perform and wait for the show to be over to spend her time with Louis.
He was on a train when he saw a newspaper hit the ground like the guys would throw the bundle on the ground. There was a big headline about Harlow dying, and I think he was quite saddened by that.
The big band era of the 1930s and 40s pretty much wiped out the whole New Orleans approach to jazz, the small combo, doing collective improvisation. Soloists took over, and then soloists got featured in big bands, pretty much organized by arrangers and band leaders. By 1940, Louis Prima has a big band, which he calls the Glebe Rhythm Orchestra, which is a great name. And you can see what he's doing over the course of the 1940s. He's appealing to the public, trying to find the sound that they want.
In the 30s, he wrote the greatest jazz classic of all time, Sing, Sing, Sing. But it didn't really come into play until Benny Goodman had the hit on it with his orchestra.
Sing, Sing, Sing is one of the great, great jazz compositions.
He was with my father from when he was like 16 years old.
I guess he thought that he could train me to work for him, which happened. So for about a month, we were doing this. So now, he said, Jimmy, we're going to work the Apollo Theater, and the audience is going to tell me if you got the job or not. I was with him for 24 years.
He was always right, like my father's best buddy, you know, right there with him all the time.
He's playing all the venues that the big bands had to play to promote the records, such as theaters and hotels, and he's setting records.
The Paramount, the Strand Theater, just all over the country. Theater after theater, and how sometimes they had to struggle to make it to get there driving.
Every time we work in the theater, the light man, after we have the rehearsal in the theater, you know, now all the light men from the front and the side, they come down, all right, Mr. Prima, give us the rundown of the show. We don't need no rundown. So what are you talking about? Just, I'll direct you with my hands. I said, how you gonna do it? Just follow me. So Louis likes to work with his hands. So now the show's going on. Somebody's doing the singer, you know, he goes like this, goes up there, pinpoint her, you over there, side lights up and down, weak, a little weaker. He's doing it all the time. He's got to wear that grooving now. He loves to, every place. He did that every theater we worked in. Did his hands, always.
One of the ironies of the repertoire of Louis Prima in the 1940s is that this is the time, really from the late 30s, that he's moving in the direction of Italian material.
When Mussolini joined Hitler and all of the Italians were sort of, how would I say, dumbfounded, or they didn't think it would happen, and he stayed with the Italian trend. He still played his Italian music and said a few Italian words.
Obviously, that's one of the things that makes Prima very special and different from other trumpet players and singers is the Italian element. And not just the fact that it's Italian, but the fact that it's specific to any kind of ethnic group, because there's really not one Italian, not just Italian-American, but there's no kind of big star at that point that stresses his ethnic group.
Riley the cop would always stop on the corner of Tony's fruit stand. He'd help himself to anything on which he could lay his hand. Riley did this quite often. Plenty of fruit he would soften, till Tony got sore and inwardly swore. Then he began to shout, "Hey, please, no squeeze of the banana. Because when you do that, then you make a flat. Hey, please, no squeeze of the banana. When you squeeze of the plum, you put him on the bum. You touch this, you touch that, you touch everything. You push this, you push that, you never buy nothing. So please, no squeeze of the banana. If you squeeze the officer, please squeeze of the coconut."
And he took off again with all the Italian hits, Angelina and Josephina and Bacicaloop.
And it's fascinating, I just heard a excerpt of Prima on the Frank Sinatra radio show in 1945, and when Prima plays and sings and when he plays the trumpet, the girls scream and swoon and everything, just like it was Sinatra himself. You know, it's the same kind of reaction. He had that same kind of charisma, you know, as far as the opposite sex went.
In 1946, Metronome recognized him as Showman of the Year.
I heard over and over, you know, wonderful stories about all the different theaters they played, and of course the Apollo was a favorite of his because he was one of the few white orchestra leaders that played the Apollo Theater.
They're the greatest audiences in the world. Like if you do something funny, they get their hat and hit the guy in front of them. They don't even know him. They hit him with the hat.
Blacks loved him. Hell, everybody loved Louis.
Well, you know, I have been a friend of Louis all my life from childhood. My dad and he were friends from their childhood and early years. My dad and his brother Leon were friends and in business together. So it's sort of like an extended family.
When Louis would come home, you see they had that house, of course, I don't know how they call them, with the basement downstairs, and then you up about 5 steps, and there's a kitchen, and there's dining room and living room. And when Louis came home, well, that all opened up. We didn't get to eat up there while Louis was gone.
Her dinners? Oh, forget it. Go out and cook.
It was the day for red gravy. I mean, that was the day we ate our sugo, you know, red sugo that day, and dobe in the gravy, meatballs with the gravy, and everything that you could imagine to have with pasta, and copious, wonderful meals, and the family all around you, and the friends of the family made it an exciting day.
So now she's doing the dishes, and I'm talking to an Italian, and we're grooving. Louis in the living room reading, and he's listening to us. And where do you think Louis got that talent? From me. From me, Jimmy. What do you mean from you? I used to be the singer in church. You did? What did you do? What did I do? I was a singer. How do you sing? She going, so one of these days, and she's gone. And slapping the temple on himself like that. And I'm slapping it. And Louis is hysterical. He's hysterical.
He did a song called The Birth of Glebe Rhythm, which was, Jan Savitt called it a shuffle beat, and Louis Prima called it Glebe Rhythm. That was his name for it. But he'd been doing that at least since 1940.
Hello, when you get mellow, mustn't be lazy, gotta be crazy. Once you get started, this is what'll happen to you. Shake it and you break it and you, oh babe, knock it and you rock it and you, oh babe, swing it and you sing it and you, oh babe, skip it and you dip it and you, oh babe, the world turns upside down when you holler, oh babe. Oh, you wiggle and you giggle and you, oh babe, shuffle and shuffle and you, oh babe, you boogie and you, oh babe, romping and stomping and you, oh babe, the world turns upside down when you holler, oh babe.
There are a bunch of big band records, too, that use that beat. I mean, it wasn't on every record. It wasn't, you know, something he did all the time. But it was something that had deep roots in, you know, Prima's career.
We're playing in Virginia, and there was a beautiful nightclub right in the open, and the ocean was right in front of us.
So Louis announced to the audience that he was looking for a singer. And if anybody sang, would like to audition, to please come up. Anyhow, I didn't go up. I was very bashful. And that was on a Friday night, so Sunday afternoon, they had a tea dance. I heard Louis announce from the stage my name. And Louis was standing there, and I said, did you call me? He said, yes. He said, I understand you're a singer. I said, yes. And he said, well, I want you to come up and sing a couple of songs. Well, I started shaking like you cannot believe. My knees wouldn't stop knocking. And I sang Embraceable You and Sleepy Time Gal. And he hired me right then and there. I went to work with him that night on the spot and left with him the following Thursday. I thought he was the most gorgeous thing that ever walked. He could look at me with his eyes and just melt me completely, no matter what he had done.
Well, Louis had come to be close to Keely, began to work with Keely and to mold and develop her personality and her singing ability.
He really didn't want to let the big band go. It's when the big bands couldn't be supported any longer. And for a long time, we worked just him and I. And we would work with little groups and really dive dump clubs in upstate New York, everywhere, anywhere that we could work.
If the big band thing wasn't going to work, he would go back to the formula that had worked for him early on in New York.
He was one of the first people to realize the potential of Las Vegas.
Vegas, it originated as, you know, mafia paradise. I mean, every conceivable way to make money was there. And it was on such a beautiful and grand scale. In a way, Vegas was not that different in substance from the environment Louis grew up in, meaning the mob controlled the joints and the people were there to entertain.
Louis finally put a call in to the Sahara Hotel here in town to a very dear friend of his named Bill Miller, who was the same Bill Miller from the Riviera in New Jersey years ago. That was such a big nightclub back there. And he told him the truth. He said, Bill, you know, he said, we're on our rear and we need a job. Bill didn't know who I was, naturally.
And he said, Bill, I think I'm going to go home and put together a small group like I used to have in New York. What do you think about that?
And Bill told him, said, Louis, I don't have anything. And Louis called him back a few times. Finally, he gave us 2 weeks in November of '54, starting November 24th.
He came to New Orleans. He went to his brother. His brother, Leon, had a fabulous young saxophone player who had gained some renown in New Orleans, Sam Butera.
When I really met Louis, I did a job at Perez's Oasis on the airline highway right outside of New Orleans. So Mr. Perez said, this kid does a lot of business, Louis. They had a Sunday afternoon matinee. Let him play with your band. And Louis said, sure. So I went on the stage and I did a couple of 2 or 3 songs with his band. After I got through, Louis said, Sam, I'm going to Vegas. If anything happens, I'm going to call you. I said, gee, that's wonderful. How much money? Don't worry about it.
It was around Christmas time, and Louis had called Leon and said he wanted Sam Butera to come immediately to Las Vegas. And Sam came.
I have to be honest and say this, until Sam came, the group didn't really cook. They were nice guys and they were pretty good musicians, but Sam was the front that Louis needed to work off of.
And he does come up with the idea of using a blend of rock and roll rhythm, a blend of rhythm and blues rhythm, and that which he had always done, which was this kind of shuffle beat.
And Louis had created the deadpan image with Keely, and with the honking sax of Sam Butera and the raucousness of Louis, and it just took off. Standing room only, people gathered outside the Casbah Theater, and the rest is history. From there, it was Capitol Records, and people all over the United States became aware of Louis Prima.
And just a gigolo, gigolo, everywhere I go, gigolo, people know the power of play. Gigolo, 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 paid for every dance, gigolo, selling is romance. Gigolo, oh, gigolo, oh, what a sin. Gigolo, gigolo, and there will come a day, and youth will pass away, and what will they say about me? When the end comes, I know they'll suggest the gigolos like those. And without me, I ain't got nobody. Oh, and there's nobody that cares for me. There's nobody that cares for me. I'm so sad and lonely. Hey, sad and lonely, sad and lonely. Want some sweet mama, come take a chance with me, 'cause I ain't so bad. And I'll sing her sweet love song. I love the time. She will only be I ain't got nobody. Oh, and there's nobody that cares for me. There's nobody that cares for me.
The success generated by Louis on the stage and the excitement was part of what created all of that whole entertainment furor in Las Vegas, where every club and every casino had a fabulous show. He opened the doors for all of that to happen.
The beat, the drive, and there was a drive. And with Louis, a magnetism that only one other person that I know of that I think had, and that was Frank Sinatra. He walked out on a stage, and there was an immediate over. You were entranced. And that's what would happen with Louis. Even stuffed shirts that would think, oh, I'm not gonna like his music, Louis Prima. Before the opening number was over, they're stomping their feet. You couldn't help it. He was magnetic.
Everybody was there. Every star. When they got through work, they were in the lounge. This is no baloney, this is true.
Sinatra would go there with Sammy Davis and those guys and say, well, look what this guy is doing. Look what he's creating here. That's what we have to create. Look at the excitement he's causing.
You look anywhere around the lounge, and there was a star, there was a star, there was another star, there was another star. Louis couldn't acknowledge everybody.
He had an extraordinary ability to feel the pulse of the audience. And not only to feel the pulse of the audience, but almost to create a pulse for the audience.
The most important thing was that the music never stopped. I mean, even in between songs, even during announcements and things like that, is that the tempo always kept going. Everything was always to the beat. And it just kept everything at this really high energy level.
The Chief always opened a show with When You're Smiling, always closed the show with Saints Go Marching In. But what happened in between there, each and every show was completely different.
When we walked on stage, we didn't know what we were going to do. He called out the songs, and we did them.
I may have seen the show thousands of times. No one show was the same.
You always managed to keep it on a very high dynamic, always kept the excitement level going, no matter what. So you know, you always were sitting at the edge of your seat in a Prima show.
When you're smiling, when you're smiling, when you're smiling, and the whole world smiles with you. And when you're laughing, oh, you're laughing, sun comes shining through. And when you're crying, oh, you bring on the rain. Stop your sign, won't you be happy again? When you're smiling, keep on smiling, and the whole world will smile with you. Jello, it's about a mama, me, mother, dog. Feed me a cucciolata, mamma mia, pensacci tu. Se ti non hai piscello, ti va, ti vende sempre bacalare, ma non dente. Se ci picchia fantasia, bacalalo, ma non do. Oh, mamma, zumba, zumba, bacala, oh, mamma, zumba, zumba, bacala, oh, mamma, zumba, zumba, bacala. Oh Marie, oh Marie, oh Marie, oh Marie, in your arms I'm longing to be, baby. Baby, tell me you love me. Tell me you love me. Kiss me once while the stars shine above me. Shine above me. Oh, Marie. Oh, Marie. Yeah, Marie. Yeah, Marie. In your arms I'm longing to be. Longing to be. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. Tell me you love me. Tell me you love me. Oh, Marie. Oh, Marie. Come here, boy. Where, Marie? Where, Marie? Quando zona ci pensa per te. Fammi dormire, fammi dormire. Uno noto, uno noto. Uno noto bracciato con te, uno noto. Uno noto bracciato con te, uno noto. Uno noto bracciato con te, uno noto. What's the matter, Sam? You can't play in Italian. Quando zona pensa per te. Ah, 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 ah. Hey, hey. Wemini, 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 wemini.
The next thing would be Sam Butera. Sam Butera had a segment in the show where Louis would introduce Sam, and Sam would do one or two of his numbers that could be a vocal or an instrumental.
I really think his version of Night Train is like the killer version.
Then, as often as not, someone else in the band, Lucino or someone, to do a segment.
If he didn't feel it had public appeal, the heck with it, you know. Never mind the musical, well, I don't say the quality of the music. He demanded that. But as far as to prove you're an artist, forget it, man. Do the gimmicks and the stuff that make it come across.
Watch them shuffling along. See them shuffling along. Go take your best gal, real pal. Go down to Levy, Austin Levy. Join that shuffling throng. Hear that music and sound. It's simply great, mate. Waiting on the levee, waiting for the property leave. Waiting on the levee, waiting on the levee, waiting for the property leave. Waiting for the property, waiting for the property, waiting for the property leave. Waiting on the levee, waiting on the levee, waiting for the property leave.
Musically, the interreaction to relationship between Louie and Keely was the sweetener. Keely was the sweetener. You know, Keely would sweetly come in and sing a little bit in English softly and nicely.
I wanna love you all night long, and nobody but you. That I love you true, and I'll do anything for you. You'll never be blue.
And she just fit completely into the act because he was the total opposite of what Prima was doing. I mean, while he was all energy and vitality and was jumping around, climbing the walls, she would just be standing still. And they were really perfect foils for each other. You know, she would just have that deadpan stare and he'd be acting like a wild man.
I wish he was like that.
I'm in the mood for love, and simply because you're near me.
Honey, but when you're near me, I'm in the mood for love.
Heaven is in your eyes, a hop to your feet, simply because you're fiddly boot.
Honey, but when you're near me, oops, slipped. I hit the button, I'm in the mood for love. Sing.
Why stop to think of weather? Why stop to think of weather? This little dream might fade. Ooh. And if there's a cloud above, and if it should rain, we'll let it. Oh, la 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 la.
Oh, Luigi, oh, let it. Oh, la 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 la.
Now, I'm in the mood for a cola Maluna.
Simply because you're Kalakaua.
Papa Nui. And why stop to think of weather? This little dream might fade.
We put our hearts together, and now we are one.
I'm not afraid, cause if it's cloud above, if it's rain, we'll let it. Cause I'm in the mood for love.
Louis was the only guy I know of who ever played Vegas that was able to get a quote from Howard Hughes to run in an ad in Billboard. The quote was, "Every time I see them, they get better."
He would fall asleep like that. Showtime, he'd wake up, go on stage. And I can't do that. There's certain people that can, you know, just fall asleep for a few minutes. And that's what he did.
But when that curtain would go up, if that audience wasn't paying very close attention, he'd make the curtain come back down.
And I've seen him on nights where that curtain went up and he didn't get the response, and he said, "Bring the curtain back down again." And the curtain would go up again, the audience was still dead, bring it back down again.
The audience would finally get hip to what he was doing, and then he would swing it and knock the back of the house out. Everything was working well. Every song was a hit for Keely. Everything that Louis and Keely did together was a big success. They were doing a lot of television at the time.
Thank you.
My name is Tony Randall.
Tony Randall,
Yes,
boy, sure glad you could make
Thank
the
you,
scene.
sir.
Oh, boy.
Sir, it is with no little enthusiasm that I would like to convey to you my copious feelings for your remarkable rhythmic offering. Yours is a joie de vivre, if I may say so, a reckless abandon, an unrestrained spontaneity, truly unparalleled in the annals of Euterpe.
Either you liked it or you didn't.
Oh, I liked it.
Oh, you not only got good talk, but you got good taste.
How gracious of you.
And as for you cats out there, you look like a real swinging group, and we're going to whale you right out of your skins. We think it's a gas that'll be digging you, and this will knock you out of your ever-loving. And this will positively flip you, because we're going to Scooby-Doo and maybe a little Shooby-Dow. Hey, what's the scoop with this word, Jazz?
That's a translation for the Guy Lombardo crowd.
I didn't know how big we were. That didn't matter to me. I was just very happy being with him, being with my kids and singing and whatever, you know. Then all of a sudden, and I don't know, it was almost like an overnight thing. I'm sure it wasn't, but that's how it appeared to me. He started drinking. He started smoking. He started gambling. And he started running all over town with different women. Maybe it was a phase he was going through, I didn't know. But it lasted so long. There was just so much going on that I wound up sick over it. I tried to talk to him about it, and I really don't think that he wanted to do it. I think it was something that he couldn't help himself.
Whatever happened began to affect their life together, he and Keely, and began to unwind. They lived in Hollywood at that time, and they had a home in Vegas, too, on a Desert Inn golf course. And as that unwound and their careers separated and they divorced as a married couple, became some difficult times. Much more difficult for Keely at that time than it was for Louis. Louis, that cat's got 9 lives. He came right back and put a thing together, went through a couple of girls trying to find someone to fill that spot. Worked for a great deal at a time without a girl singer. He still had Sam Butera and the Witnesses. He still had all the marvelous music to draw on. He still had his own talent to draw on. There was some things different, of course. The fans were used to Louis and Keely. How is it going to be different?
Louis doing the twist is the epitome, in essence, of the twist. Not only that, but he did the Gone with the Wind of the twist.
Oh, when the saints go twisting in, when the saints go twisting in, everybody twist, with the twisters, when the saints go twisting in, oh, around and around and around they go, 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 round and round they go. When the saints go twisting in, oh, when the saints go twisting in, everybody twist, with the twisters, when the saints go twisting in, oh, round and around and around they go, around 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 and around, oh, bo 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 bo, round and round they go.
Louis doing the twist, I think, is an essential glimpse of Louis, because Louis doing the twist is Louis taking on the 20th century in every form. It's Louis with the cornet, it's Louis doing sing, 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 it's Louis doing everything.
In 1962, he was playing the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And that's where I read in the paper that he was auditioning girl singers. I was working as a waitress at Howard Johnson's restaurant at the time. He called me up during the show. And I think because I was so young and naive and innocent looking with the full crinoline skirts and poodle haircut, and I thought that he thought he was just going to get a kick calling me up on stage during the show. So he asked me, do you know I'm in the Mood for Love? And I said, yes. So he started the intro to I'm in the Mood for Love. And of course, I knew every arrangement and everything. So I just did it. And he would look at me, and then he'd look at Sam. And then he said, well, do you know this song? And I said, yes. So we did the next one. Then he kept me up there, and he went into Just a Gigolo, and I Ain't Got Nobody. And I did all of the backgrounds with the boys, and I just knew exactly what to do. So he never really told me I got the job. But he said to my mom and I, we're opening in Basin Street East tomorrow. Can you be here in the parking lot tomorrow morning to take the bus to open at Basin Street East? And of course I did.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like for you now to meet the new addition to our little family, a young lady we're very proud of from New Jersey, Gia Mayone.
Somewhere there's music, how near, how far. Somewhere there's heaven, it's where you are. The darkest night would shine if you would come to me soon. Until you will, how still my heart, how high the moon. Somewhere there's music, how near, how far. Somewhere there's heaven, it's where you are. The darkest night would shine if you would come to me soon. Come on, be still, my heart. Slow down, heart. Hold it, heart. How high the moon. Come on, be still, my heart. Slow down, heart. Hold it, heart. How high the moon. How high the moon. How high the
It was a Cinderella story come true. And the same engagement later that week, the Ed Sullivan Show. So that was my first TV show, my first professional engagement. And it was wonderful. Everyone else was a nervous wreck. I was not.
I want you. I want you. I want you too. I want you too. I want you to be. What? I want you to be my baby. Will you? Now will you please? Will you please? Will you please tell? Will you please tell me if you're gonna be my baby? Listen to your mama and you never will regret it. Cause if anybody wanted you could tell them that instead of the only thing I know is that I never come forget you. I've been longing for you, baby, ever since the day I met you. I got you where I want you. I'm never gonna let you get away from me. Do what I tell you, I'm the copy you, and so you better start to piece it. If you ever lose my love, you know you never can replace it. I think it's time for you to start to give me some love. Carrying a don't fuse high then love it. It's time for you to give me a little turn love. Baby, hold me tight and do what I tell you. I want you. I want you too. I want you too.
I want you to be.
What?
Want you to be my baby, cause will you please?
Will you please?
Will you please tell?
Will you please tell?
Will you please tell? Ooh, bitty, my brother. Listen to your mama and you never will regret it, cause if anybody wanted you could tell them that it's the only thing I know is that I never gonna forget you. I belong for you, baby, ever since the day I met you. I got you where I want you. I'm never gonna let you get away from me. Do what I tell you. I'm the copy you, and so you better start to face it. If you ever lose my love, you know you never can replace it. I think it's time for you to give me some loving. Carrying a torch for you, like an oven.
It's time for you to give me a little turn love, maybe hold me tight and
do what I tell you.
I want you. I want you too.
I want you to be. I want you to be my
I don't know where idolatry ended and love began. We were in Lake Tahoe, and it was in between the second and third show, and he said to me, meet Rolly and me at the side entrance of Harris right after this show. Change your clothes and meet me. So I did. They were in the car, and I thought, oh, my God, he doesn't like the way I sing. They're going to bump me off. I don't know what they're going to do. So I get in the limo, and we're going down the mountain from Lake Tahoe towards Reno. And Louis took a little box out of his coat and had 2 rings. And he said, I'd like you to marry me now. And I don't even know, I can't remember if I answered. But we went to a justice of the peace, got married, came back, did the third show, and instead of introducing me as Gia My Own, he said, and now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Mrs. Prima.
There was no hesitancy on the part of the audience to react to Louis in a positive way. Went back into the Sahara. It didn't play to hundreds of people, played to thousands, tried tens of thousands of people. Every night, those shows were jam-packed every show, three shows a night. can remember that the 5:10 in the morning show, if you could imagine that, was still filled with that same room full of stars, every musical star.
But I don't think there was a period when really Prima's fortunes lagged because of the absence of Keely. I mean, obviously there was less, star power because Keely had been a headliner at that point. The problem with Prima's later career, which he dealt with very well, was the onset of this whole other kind of music. There was really not much he could do against things like the British invasion and stuff like that. There was not much of the singer-songwriter movement or flower power. I mean, there wasn't really much he could do to stay in the limelight at that point. And it's the same thing that happens to Frank Sinatra, to Tony Bennett, to all the great stars of that period. It's a way of finding a way to deal with that. And the way Prima dealt with that was by concentrating on his core audience in Las Vegas and New Orleans. And he finds amazing things to do, like this whole connection with Walt Disney later on, where he starts recording Disney songs, that he does an album of music from Mary Poppins, and he appears in The Jungle Book, and that's kind of like his single most famous film. Here's Prima, nearing 60 years old, making his single most famous movie appearance of his whole career. So in a way, the latter period is really a very triumphant period, particularly when you consider what Prima was up against in those years.
Well, I have great memories. He was wonderful. He was funny all the time and made us laugh a lot.
We used to sit either up in the sound booth, like at the Sands Hotel. I remember sitting up in the sound and light booth, watching him perform if they didn't allow children anywhere in the theater there. It was either that or we were off to the side of the stage. And I loved watching him play, and he'd bring me and my sister out every once in a while and make us tell dirty jokes. We were little kids and didn't know what we were saying or even why it was funny, and the crowd would get a big kick out of it.
In the 70s, he was mainly working theaters in the Round, the Hilton Hotel, keeping track and making sure that we were always making albums and keeping current with what was going on in music.
And then we made some arrangements for him to do sort of come back to New Orleans and try to work out some arrangements so that he would perform most of the year in New Orleans. It was a big departure for Louis to want to do that. He came to New Orleans and performed for a while at the Economy Hall in the Royal Sonesta.
They guaranteed him however many weeks a year it was, and so let's go down there, I'll return home. And it was big for him because he, every night had a crowd and people still loved him. And
Caledonia, where? Caledonia, where? Now what makes you think it's so hard? I love you just the same. Crazy about the woman, Caledonia is the thing. You ought to see my woman. She's 6.5 feet tall. You gotta see Caledonia, 6.5 feet tall. She sleeps with her head in the bed and her commissariama in the hall. I got another woman, short and thin. I got another woman on the side, you know how it is, short and thin. Last night I went to her house, I knocked on the door, but she wouldn't let me in.
And, he still played Vegas, he still played, New York and Reno and places, but not on the frequency because the music climate was changing.
He was getting headaches a lot, and he went to the doctor.
So he saw the doctor, and the doctor sent him to Hollywood they had an ME scan machine brought there.
My mother took me aside and told me, your father is going to be going in the hospital, and you have to, right now, you have to grow up and help me out here, so it was a very hard thing.
And he had one done, and sure enough, they saw a tumor. It was not malignant, it was benign, and it was in the brain stem, which is the most difficult place. Every nerve in your body goes through there, so there was only one neurosurgeon that would risk it, even though there would be less than 1% chance of survival. But he felt that, Louis wanted it. He was vital. He had a young family. Immediately when they entered the brain, part of the brain hemorrhaged, and he went into what they call a semi-comatose state. He could understand and see everything going on around him, but he could not respond back, nor could he match a thought with an action.
While he was sick in the hospital in Los Angeles, Mount Sinai Hospital, my mother was there every day, and she would drive into town on the weekends to pick us up and drive us out there, and we'd spend the weekends.
They said that there was nothing further they could do and that I would have to have him moved from there.
Then they got Louis home, got him to Ochsner, and but he didn't ever come out of it. We just watched him die.
And he was in a coma for 3 years, and that was really difficult. It was a very difficult thing for any family to go through.
After maybe 2 years in the coma, semi-coma state, he closed his eyes and didn't open them anymore. And I believe at that time he just gave up.
And I went to see him once at Ochsner, when he was at Ochsner, and it was sort of sad, and to know that he was incapacitated for so long, because in everyone's vision, Louis was indestructible, and he just was a monumental man, and you just never imagined that Louis would ever be ill and not playing pretty for the people.
I loved him. I really did. I loved him. He was a lovable man. I miss him.
He just made so many people happy. His music was happy music, and these people relive through his music happy memories, and he really touched people. He really did.
I don't think that there has been or will be another performer, another showman like Louis Prima. He had every element necessary to be a great star, and he was a great star.
And regardless if it was the little group, him and I alone, the big orchestra, whatever, him by himself, he always had that star aura, I don't know what you call it, charisma. He had it.
You can still hear his music, and no matter who you are, it makes your foot tap, and it makes you want to, swing.
I love them all. Sammy, Frank, you name them. But Louis Prima, he was the epitome of an entertainer. He had ideas, he could write lyrics like that. I loved him.
Just a gigolo, everywhere I go. People know the part I'm playing. Trade forever dance, selling each romance. Oh, what they say. There will come a day, youth will pass away, and what will they say about me? When the end comes, I know they'll say just a gigolo. 'Cause life goes on without me.